Yeah. Hey guys, this morning we got Rob here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about stretching. And I want to start with a quote, and we're going to just bounce back and forth and talk about it. It says, "Only a mediocre person is always at his best." What do you think about that?
Oh yeah. Well, and so much of that is, I think, contentment, right? That they get, I know that there was a part in my career where I met a certain plateau of income every year, and just with what was going on in my life, with raising kids and the other things that were going on in my life with my family and all that. Like I was content with that amount. And so, I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do in order to grow my business. I was just doing the things to maintain my business. And, obviously there was no, not only was there no growth, there was really no opportunity for growth. And I was becoming mediocre in my habits. I was becoming mediocre in my outlook, in my projections. And, you're either growing or you're dying, right? And so, the business died a little bit. I personally with my internal growth, died a little bit. And it took some pretty, foundational changes. My kids, graduated, went off to college, and some other family issues resolved themselves. And so, now I'm trying to regrow again. And you've got to, there's a lot more effort involved in doing that as opposed to just trying to build on, what you did the previous year.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that a little bit more because there are some places where mediocrity can slip in without us even realizing that that's happening. What are some areas that you kind of felt like that could slip in for you? I mean, mediocrity is easy because everybody's doing it, right?
Oh yeah, it's comfortable, it's easy, right? And so, it's so easy to sit down every day and do just a few things to build your business. But it's even easier not to. And I think people get, distracted with whether it's doom scrolling or whether it is maybe some of the family pulls that they have in their life. Their kid has a special need, or they've got a sick mother or whatever. And they set aside the very few minor building blocks that they need to do in order to continue to build. And so, if you're not time blocking or otherwise, committing to doing just an hour every day of trying to aggressively grow your business, then you're falling into that mediocrity trap.
So that's a really good point. I mean, I think that it's the mediocre piece. There has to be a little bit of a tension, right? Because otherwise, if there's no tension and everything is super relaxed, it's just like you're following the lazy river for the most part. Now, as far as the tension is concerned, it's almost like a rubber band. We're really designed to be like that rubber band where it's constantly the only really good use of a rubber band is if it's under tension, right? It's because that's really what it's designed to do. And so mediocrity is like a rubber band without tension. Wouldn't you say that? And so
Oh,
how
absolutely.
can we, if we've been sitting on our laurels, let's say we had a fantastic year last year and a fantastic year the year before, and now all of a sudden we're starting to slip a little bit and we're not pushing as hard. That tension gets lost. And so how do we rekindle that tension? What is your way of seeing that tension rekindle?
Well, I mean, you hear a lot of times about how, drug addicts say, I had to hit rock bottom before I got better, right? And hopefully, if you take your foot off the gas and you become, mediocre in your habits, hopefully, there will probably be some warning signs, right? As to, hey, I'm not producing as much this year as I did last year, or I've not paid as close attention to my health this year, and I've gained some weight, or whatever it is that it is you're focusing on, and hopefully you heed those warning signs. And then if you do, then it's super important to not beat yourself up about it, right? We all, I think, operate with these rhythms of activity, and then we have to have some rest. and that's absolutely okay. And so you need to forgive yourself for those times that you've been coasting, but you also need to say, okay, it's time to maybe not have that extra slice of pizza. It's okay to, you know,
Now you're meddling.
what
You're meddling with pizza, man. Stop the meddling with pizza.
it's whatever it is, I need to, maybe spend that extra hour making the phone calls. I need to dedicate a little bit more time to that family relationship that's struggling, whatever it is, to try to turn things around and set things on the right path. And I think everybody knows when things are moving in the right direction, when things are moving in the wrong direction. It's just really having that awareness, and that positive discontentment that things can be better. And if you can tap into that, then you'll be able to swing it around.
So I kind of want to build off of that because I think that there are periods where somebody has never seen anything but mediocrity. And then there are periods of time where we slip into mediocrity because we're just exhausted, just tired. And so we get into that phase where we're overworked, we haven't taken a break, we haven't retooled, we haven't re-energized, and we get ourselves into a position where we just slip into it because it's like, oh, that pizza was so good, let me get one more just to meddle a little bit more of pizza. Um, and kind of play that game a little bit too much. But then there's those who have never really seen anything like that. And I'm going to tell you that in my case, early on in the early part of my business, I'd never seen somebody succeed. All my people that I knew were just regular people. I'd never seen anybody pull themselves out of that mediocrity phase into a successful phase. What do you feel like it takes to get out of that into a successful phase when you really don't have any guidelines, guides, or you don't have anybody that you've seen do it?
Yeah, and I want to first of all say I have so much empathy for that person, right? There are people that were born into circumstances. Maybe they had a broken family, or maybe they are living in a poor mindset, right? Robert Kiyosaki talks about rich dad, poor dad, right? And sometimes it takes being exposed to a dynamic person to see that things can be better. I think that, if you are someone that is curious about the world, if you're somebody that exposes yourself to new and different things, then you will, just by the very act of exposing yourself to other mindsets, to other belief systems, you will come across somebody that is successful. And if you can look at that and go, I want that, or that looks like something I need to follow or pursue, then I think that will be, whether that's a motivational speaker, or whether that's a friend, or whether that's a successful business person. It's very important not to look at that successful person and be like, well, I wonder who he screwed over to get that, and more about, hey, we live in the greatest country in the world, and you can go from the bottom 20% in economic to the top 20% in economic. We have the flexibility in this country to be able to do that. You just have to find the right way. And so, having that curiosity, being inspired by that, and then, you might have to dig into podcasts, you might have to dig into books, you might have to dig into seminars, in order to, to grow that mindset in your own mind. Somebody like Jim Rohn is an excellent example of that.
So let's build into that a little bit deeper because I think one of the things that I had to realize early on, because there's a couple different pieces that come to this as I'm thinking about mediocrity. Okay, because early on when I was playing that game, I didn't think I was mediocre. I really wasn't doing anything to stand out. It wasn't anything because I felt like I was, in fact, I was in construction, I was in the trades, and I felt like, dirty hands, clean money, just keep working hard and working really hard and doing your thing. But I'm proud of what I've built and what I've done. But I think there comes a point in time where if you want to get somewhere you've never been, you're going to have to do a few things you've never done. And
Mhm.
these are actually pretty important pieces to understand because if you really see something out in the future and you'd really like to grow towards that, you're going to have to stretch because you haven't been there. You don't know how to get there. Because you've never been there, you've never seen anybody take the steps to get there. but you want to get there yourself. And so now how do you create that path? And I think the stretching piece is important. What have been some stretches that you've had to do in the last year and a half to, create this for you?
I mean, for me, it's like I said, I was mediocre and I was content, and it just came to a point of where, like I said, my kids graduated high school, they went off, and so now I had something else. I needed to find another outlet for my energies, right? It became sometimes success is a decision, right? You have to make that decision to commit to do new things in order, like you said, in order to have new results. And so, when I sat down and looked at my productivity over the last 5 years or so, I realized that I'd been very content, and so it's time to try some new things, and so not everything's going to work, and also knowing that even the most successful people sometimes. Have things that they don't know. No one can know everything, right? And so, you try to find an example that will models what it is that you're trying to do and learn from that person.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because I think sometimes we just lean back into a mindset that's comfortable instead of trying to stretch and get into a mindset that can feel uncomfortable because it's leading us somewhere that we haven't been before. And how fast we attack that is really up to us, but it's if we're going to reach our potential, we really have to find a way to change that mindset a little bit and try to get ourselves out of that groove. I mean, and look at it in nature. Just look at nature. A tree doesn't just stop growing because it's reached its potential. It keeps growing until the day it dies. And so,
Right.
I mean, that's a really big deal for what we're trying to do. So let's talk about, the piece because there's another quote that I found that is this quote is actually pretty cool. I like it a lot. It's called "Easy is the mother of mediocrity." And so there's
Yeah.
a lot of easy things that we can do, but if it's easy, how replaceable are we? Because if it takes 2 weeks to train somebody to take over your position, it sounds like to me you're more of a commodity than somebody who literally they've got the expertise that cannot be replaced. Tell me what
Oh,
you think
absolutely.
with that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and if you think about, for example, when you look at your business or you look at my business, right? I mean, and I think this is true of many businesses. There's highly productive time where you are, where you're earning your money, right? And then there is the time that you're building to that highly productive time, and then there's everything else, right? And so, if you're out, running down your dry cleaning and you're going to the grocery store and you're doing $15 an hour work, right? Then, you're probably not going to be able to do your $90 an hour or your $120 an hour or your $250 an hour work. And so, when you say easy is the mother of mediocrity, the person that works that burger flipping job at McDonald's, that's the reason why they make a minimum wage. That's the reason why they can't, have some of the nicer things in life because anybody can flip burgers, right? Not as many people can walk a client through, all the mortgage ramifications of going down one path or going down another path to save as much money as possible in interest and in taxes and all those kinds of structures. And so you've got to if you're not happy with what you're doing, whether in terms of your income or in terms of your life, you basically have three choices. You can either improve your skills, or you can find someone who's willing to pay you more for your current skills, or you can start your own business and then you can, pay somebody else to do some of the things that you're doing right now, a fair wage, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing because I think that you hit it pretty close to what I'm thinking is that sometimes mediocrity it's all about who you surround yourself with that stuff because if you're hanging out with people who are just not invested in trying to make themselves better, and trying to change and stretch and grow, you're literally going to become like them. And you have to change your lifestyle and change your mindset if you really want to get anywhere. And so I just want to take a real quick minute to introduce Rob. We just kind of got started here, didn't talk a whole lot, but Rob is a real estate agent down in Houston, right?
Yep, that's
Yep.
correct.
Down in
In
Houston.
Cyprus, which is a suburb.
Okay, fantastic. And he sells he does a relationship selling version of helping people by referral, and he's built quite the business doing it, from what I understand. And so yeah, it's a fantastic thing what we're talking about stretching, because this really fits into exactly what we're trying to do with our own businesses. Is Rob is trying to help more people buy homes, and I am of course trying to finance them too. So this is a fantastic conversation with him. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this. Mahatma Gandhi said the difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would suffice to solve most of the world's problems, which I think is an interesting quote there, because what we do and what we are capable of is sometimes the tension that we're forgetting to take advantage of.
hmm Yeah, I think you've probably heard the statistic that, our brain, we use something like 10% of our brain
Mhm.
capacity, right?
Mhm.
And when you think of that, if we were to just, if we were just to increase how we use our brain by 5%, you could, exponentially improve, your output, your outlook, your situation, whatever that might be. And so much of that comes down to, in my opinion, so much of that comes down to curiosity. So much of that comes down to you know just a relentless drive to be better, right? And so people can make small everyday improvements like that do platform into exponential growth, whether that's personal growth, financial growth, spiritual growth, whatever that is. But going back to the easy as the mother of mediocrity, you really can't just relax on your laurels. You've got to have that spark.
And you got to keep the tension going. You got to really keep
Yeah.
the tension going, because otherwise you get yourself into a position where you're just becoming like everything else. And I think that the interesting thing about it is new levels, new devils, right? And so once you've created a new level and a new version of yourself, now you start attacking bigger and harder problems. But that's the way it's supposed to be. What are
Oh,
some of the
absolutely.
bigger and harder problems you've seen?
Oh yeah. So I mean, for example, when I first got into the business, obviously I was young. I'm dealing with first-time home buyers. So obviously those people that are buying at that time 200 and $300,000 homes, they have certain issues, and you're having to do a lot of hand-holding. As I grew in my business and my the number of people that I could serve expanded, and I started getting into the luxury market and dealing with home buyers that are buying $1 million home or $1.5 million home or $2 million homes. You're still hand-holding. They're just different problems. And
Right.
so there's always going to be some resistance. There's always going to be some wall that you're butting up against. And the nature of those will change. But those are good problems to have, right? It's much better to have that $2 million problem than it is to have that $200,000 problem.
hmm So, as you're talking, as we wrap up today and we start finishing up the conversation, what would be one of the takeaways from your journey that you've seen with this stretching and trying to stay out of mediocrity? What would be the number one thing you would want to share with anybody listening to this morning?
So I think for everybody, it is very natural to drift, and drift can be deadly. Drift is something where you can put everything on autopilot. You can continue on and think that you're making progress, but if you take your eye off the ball, you're going to drift. And if you're a pilot and you're flying from Seattle to Miami, if you drift just 1 degree off, on your flight, you're either going to end up in the Caribbean Ocean or in Washington, D.C. You're not going to end up in Miami.
Mhm.
So, you definitely need to pay attention to things that are going on, and remain vigilant, and ask yourself from time to time, hey, am I drifting? Am I getting content? Am I slipping into mediocrity? If you are, it's okay. Give yourself some grace. We all get tired. We all are designed to run for a period of time and then rest for a period of time. It is okay to rest from time to time, but you've got to stay focused and remain vigilant against drift so that you can end up where you want to go.
That's a great takeaway. Well, that's a great, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning on this conversation and this little quick podcast, which will be posted here to YouTube here shortly. So I'm Chris Parks with the Parks Mortgage Group and Rob Rule with what real estate firm?
Next Home Realty Center in Cypress, Texas.
Cypress, Texas. All right. There you are, guys.